You know that when they found the one of Isaiah 53 reads the same way it reads in my book, my Bible. And it was 2,000 years old. And there used to be a little place over here in town that a lady had put a little museum in, and she even had pieces of some of that from Palestine that you could go in there and look at. I've seen it in Raleigh at the museum, and I've seen it in National Geographic. So they, way back in the day, the people of where Iraq is today, they made clay tablets, and they're still finding clay tablets where whatever letters they were writing, whatever books they were writing, or king's orders, they still find that in some of those excavations that they do. So there's always been communication. I believe there's always been communication from heaven to earth through the prophets, through Moses, later through Jesus, then through the apostles and the prophets of the New Testament period. And so these books that Paul has written, they tell us many things. And so there's those 3 pages. The first one, you have an outline of 1 Timothy. Now, I'm just go through this with you so you can look these things up and study it later. But today I'm just going over, giving an overview. He gives a charge to Timothy, chapter 1, a salutation, and his charge to Timothy concerning what he's to do in Ephesus. And then in chapter 2, instruction concerning public worship. And chapter 3, directions about the qualifications and selection of elders and deacons. We've looked at that, and when I say we, I'm talking about the church at large, all the way across America and many other places, have looked at those things, particularly the chapters about elders and deacons. You can remember, those of you who've been in the church nearly all your life, you can remember listening to that sermon after sermon or Bible class after Bible class about what it's going to take to serve as an elder or a deacon's wife or an elder's wife or a preacher. And so directions about the qualifications and selection of elders and deacons. And then chapter 4, we'll study about instructions and warning concerning the apostasy. By the way, what does apostasy mean? It's not a disease, but in one view it could be considered a disease. Apostasy. Do we use that word anymore in our everyday language? Therefore, no one's holding up their hand. Karma's not here this morning to tell me.
Falling away?
That's what it means. Going astray. Apostasy. You leave the path and get off the road. So you didn't stay true to whatever it is you were dealing with. Concerning the apostasy. So he'll deal with that because in the early church, they had people that didn't do things right. And so they had to be corrected. They had to get back on path. Chapter 5 and 6, instructions concerning various groups in the church. Different age groups. He speaks to widows indeed. Who's a widow indeed? I mean, don't hold up your hand today. Explain to me what it means, a widow indeed. Larry?
Widow indeed was somebody who didn't have relatives to take care of her. She was over 60.
Okay, she had to be over 60, and she didn't have any people that should be taking care of her that were relatives of hers. And in addition to that, Larry, as she had served in the church, she was to have been known for how she served in the church. And one of the things that is said in there, that she washed the disciples' feet. And so she was a woman, a widow indeed. Her husband has passed. She doesn't have any children that were obligated to take care of her. And so then the church could step in and take care of that person. And so he deals with that. And see, that's just a normal, everyday thing that Paul gives instructions how the church is to work with that. Widows indeed. He has enrolled widows. That's ones that could be put on the list for the church to actually help them. And of course, in that chapter, he deals with elders. He deals with slaves. Timothy and Titus and the early teachers and preachers, they had to know how to deal with people who were free-born and people who were actually slaves to other people. They had to be able to teach the slaves their responsibility. Even though they were slaves, they were to honor their masters. And so how you exist in whatever condition the Lord calls you from is what he's talking about. And so, yeah, you're a slave, but even as a slave, you can glorify God, is what he was getting at. Then he's going to talk about false teachers and what they were motivated by. And in our outline it says covetous. They wanted more. They coveted things that wasn't theirs. And they're false teachers. Timothy is personally told to keep the commandments. And he also talks about people of worldly means. You know, the Lord has a lot of very rich people in his church. Did y'all know that? I'm one of them. I'm very rich. I am very rich. I got several pairs of shoes. I have 2 closets full of shirts, 14 drawers full of socks. I'm overstepping there a little bit. I got socks from when I was in the Air Force 50 years ago. And so he deals with things that we deal with today. That's why the book's important. It's not out of age, it's current. Then 2 Timothy, he writes Timothy a second letter. And he's always encouraging Timothy. Timothy was like a son to Paul. And I would think from Timothy's standpoint, Paul was like the father. Now, what kind of father did Timothy have? Do we have any idea what kind of father Timothy had? We know what kind of mother and grandmother he had. What kind of mother and grandmother did he have? They were faithful to God. They taught him to be faithful to God. And it was through them that he had been matured enough spiritually that Paul chose him to be one of his co-workers and to travel with him. And what was their name? His mother and Eunice and Lois. And so Timothy was we would say he was brought up right. And we all would like to be told by our descendants that we brought them up right. It's a big deal to be a parent. It's a big deal to be a daddy. And I prefer the name daddy over father or dad. Anybody can be a father, but not every man is suited to be a daddy. Now, that's my view. So I'll just let you know. I take great pride in being a daddy and hope that my kids consider me, and my grandkids and my great-grandkids consider me as a good papa. I have a great responsibility placed upon me, and you have a great responsibility placed upon you. And Timothy and Titus, they had great responsibility. And so that's why we're studying these books. In this one, he's going to talk about, the first part, he's going to talk about Timothy's past, his heritage as far as his mother's and his grandmother. And Paul will talk about himself in the first chapter of 2 Timothy, about the fact of his faithfulness at all times as an apostle. And he'll continue to exhort Timothy to pass it on to other people. And he'll talk about in the third chapter, the workman approved of by God. So that's us. We're all workmen in the kingdom of God and what it takes to be approved of by God. He'll also talk about false teachers and also the inspired scriptures in that third chapter. And then in the fourth chapter, he'll be signing off, we would say. He's given a farewell address to Timothy, telling him some things that are still on his heart and his mind, and he's passing them on. Then we get to Titus. And he will greet Titus. He will give Titus instructions concerning the elders. He'll talk about the application of healthy or sound teaching for individual conduct, for aged people. See, back there in the back, we have classrooms and we have kids that are like this. We have one for this height. We have one for this height. Then this height. And then our height. So he talks about people at different stages of their life. For aged people, now he does bring up the aged first. He may do that, Joyce, so he can catch them before they leave. So for aged people, for younger people. And then he talks about slaves again, but also civil servants. About honesty, about doing your work as a servant of people or a servant of a charge that you're under, taking care of something. And he talks about the proper attitude of Christians toward the world that they're living in. How would you like to have lived at that time? What do you like living at this time? What makes living at this time? How many of you were born in the 18th century? None of you? Well, there's certainly no one born in the 21st century in this room right now. So we've gone from horse-drawn wagons and buggies in 1900 to the very first automobiles in the early 1900s. We've gone from taking 3 to 5 months to travel by a Conestoga wagon from St. Louis to the West Coast, nearly a half a year, to doing it now in less than 4 hours. And we get pictures of our world and the world around us, spinning. And if those people that rode those Conestoga wagons could have only seen what was going to happen, and for some of them it happened within 50 years. We got the railroad out there pretty quick. after the Civil War. And so they went immediately from at least 3 months traveling to they could do it in 3 or 4 days. That was like really going fast. Well, you kick that on back to the time Paul's writing these letters, and it would be several months' travel for him to go from Antioch of Syria up to Jerusalem, or going over to where we're looking at him now in Ephesus, which is in Turkey. And so he deals with ordinary things of life. Now, when we get to Titus, in the first chapter, he's going to deal with the false teachers. He's going to expose them. And he's also going to, in the second chapter, he's going to talk about sound or healthy teaching for individual conduct. For aged people, that's where I got off here. For younger people, for civil slaves. The grounding of the Christian's conduct in the teaching of the gospel is the next major point. And the extractive meaning of God's grace. We love to think about and talk about and depend upon God's grace. So Paul deals with that in the second chapter. And then our attitude toward the world that surrounds us. And we know that that's something that we struggle with. How we're going to handle ourselves in this present world. Well, they were worried about it back then also. The motivation of this attitude based upon the Christian's justification by the mercies of God. We've been justified by God's mercy. And so he deals with that. And then he returns to his talking about false teachers. So, the role that these books have for us as members of the church, I think are very, very important. But I think they are in the book for the real education of those who would take and seek the role of being a minister of the gospel, being an elder, being a deacon, being a teacher. It gives us guidelines as to how we are to conduct ourselves and how important it is that God has placed all these things in the church for the benefit of the church. And so, any comments?
Isn't it amazing that when God's word was put forth to us back then, that God knew already what the technology of the world would be today. So the same principles back then applies, even though the technology has changed. Like you were saying, the fastest man could travel, fast as a horse could run, and now we can go to the moon. But God already knew that. I mean, he is indifferent to the point that his word still applies. The same principle that he's given those folks with no technology that we have today, and same principles apply.
Notice how
And
we
it
said-
will apply to the end of time.
Yes,
So
it does.
I don't know what the technology will be 100 years from now, but it don't make no difference. The same principle's gonna apply.
Times change. Things are invented. Things change. But truths are the truth.
God's word don't change.
Yeah, and so, how many of you ever went to a revival service in a big canvas tent? Have you ever done that? Well, I know you folks, I want you to hold your hand up, okay? These right over in here. because it happened out here on Piney Green Road. That's how this congregation got started in the late 40s, early 50s. We really started before 52, by the way, because I came through a building here in 1954 when I was a teenager traveling up to Richlands. So I know the church was already established before 52. But they finally moved off the base. They were meeting in a tool shed. When they built what's the Torah Terrace. When they built that, and actually that's out there on 24, when they built that, and then the Torah Terrace, the company that built it had a tool shed. The brethren and the sister, they had been meeting in one another's houses. They were all military. They were either Navy or Marine Corps. And they were meeting out there on the base in their houses, or if they'd found means to have a house, a rental here in town. But anyway, they would meet in houses out there on the base, and finally they got access to that tool shed. So they got busy and fixed it up so it would work, and it worked, and that's where it really began to start. And people that are in the military, and we love that here, and this congregation is one of the congregations in our brotherhood that does work around the world because of the military. And so those members that came from Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, of course, Texas, they would write home about how little contact there was out here east of Raleigh for the church. And so they would send from those congregations, they would send preachers down here at times and hold meetings for this little group that was meeting, which would be this lady sitting right here. She'd be one of them. This is her daughter over there. In a little while, she was one of them. And so that's how it began. But they were meeting in old canvas tent. I've been at old canvas tents. When I was in Trinidad, that's how we started congregations in all those villages there. We go out, set up a tent. But, pardon?
Buford Carroll was,
Yeah,
he was in the Navy.
yeah. Buford Carroll was a Navy man. I don't know if he was a medic or what, but I knew him when I was 12 years old in the next county. He would go over there to where our little country congregation was. Huh? Yeah, Newport, out there on the 9-foot road. The 9-foot road was called the 9-foot road because the commissioners in Carteret County had enough money to pave the road from Newport out to what's today 24, but they only had enough money to pave it halfway. And so they told the citizens of Newport, we're going to go halfway with this. And they said, hey, why don't you pave it all the way? They're going to make an 18-foot road. And they said, look, why don't you just pave it 9 feet, and we'll get off on the side when somebody meets us. That's the way it is in northwestern Nebraska when you get out into ranching country. There's a road there that's right for a 2-wheel or 4-wheel car, but you had to get off if someone's coming the other way. That was something Jack and Scott and I got to see and do when we hunt out there. So they agreed to that. So they laid out the pavement in the 40s. It's 9 feet wide. I grew up knowing that was a 9-foot road. The little Church of Christ building was out there. It's about 3 miles from 24 going towards Newport. The place was there on the right, little wooden building. But the people before they got started there on the base, they would drive all the way over there, about 40 miles, to go to church. I have parents and grandparents through the years that would call me here and talk about their daughter or their husband, or her husband, a daughter, or their son, and they would talk about, sometimes they didn't like what we did, so they didn't want their children to come to church here. So I told them, well, if they want to, they can drive to Wilmington and find a church that might suit them. Or they can drive to Newport or to Moorhead and find a church maybe that suits them. Or they can drive over to Beulahville and find a church that suits them. I said, or they can just be unfaithful. And I had grandparents and parents say to their children, well, we just don't go into, worry about it, wait till you get transferred or come back home. It hurts me when a grandmother or grandfather or parents have some idea that we are so weird that their children shouldn't come here to go to worship. They'd rather than not go anywhere, they'd be contaminated.
But you understand that the Buell Church only has about 50 members. And my neighbor has moved in, and that's where they're traveling to.
Well, so anyway, you can always make a choice. We're not perfect, that's for sure.
But that's not what
but-
Paul is telling Timothy.
No.
Paul is telling Timothy, you should be like me because I'm following what Christ wants us to do. So you need to take your example from me. But first, you took your example from your mother and your grandmother. He's showing how the steps build and build and build. Now, we don't know about Timothy's, married or family or anything. He doesn't bother to tell us about that. But he gives us from the leaders of the church, first from God to him, to the leaders of the church, to the mothers and the grandmothers, the steps of teaching your children.
Yep.
And it's very important that we keep that trend. You and I, personally, we still have a responsibility to our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, and if we live long enough, our great-grandchildren. Because that's the steps it takes to keep your family in God. The Jewish people had to teach in the Old Testament, they were told, you teach your children from the day they're born of God.
Yep.
And so
Deuteronomy 6.
it's our responsibility to do that. It's also our responsibility to see that they're taught correctly as a Christian and also as a person in the world.
So, just talking about our congregation here, it had it started in the late 40s. And we are in a unique situation because Uncle Sam chose to buy this place that the base is on in 1938 or 39. And Elmer J's people were moved off their plantation downriver here, and everybody else was moved off their plantations or their small farms or the big farms. And their land was gone like that in a day. And the base decided before World War II started to build a base here so that it could have amphibious training on our beautiful beaches. And actually, Elmer J., I'm sorry your family lost the farm, but had you not lost the farm, this river right here, we'd be like Palm Beach County in Florida. There'd be big homes all the way down New River, all the way to the ocean, and it would all be, they wouldn't be common people. It'd be people who had a lot of money, just like Palm Beach County.
Nobody that was moved off was happy.
We know they weren't happy.
I mean, they didn't move you off to make you happy. I guarantee you that everybody that was moved off
What is that law?
just took whatever, and if you didn't move off, they just moved you off.
Yeah. What is that law that they use to sometimes make somebody's house be moved? Intimate domain? Yeah. So that's basically what they did. Now, they paid them something, but they didn't pay anything what the land was worth or what it would have been in a few years, what it would have been worth. You know, so, but the point is, we have a work to do here because the people that we worship with in this congregation go all over the world. They go back home, changed a lot of times for the better. They go back to Minnesota. One of our members is out there now selling family property. His wife is here. That's Al. He's over in Minnesota now. But this congregation is uniquely fitted for people who are on the move. In the last 20 years, we've started having more military members decide to put down roots here and are living here with us. The ice cream trucks coming by. This is a new thing. We had never had this before today. Well, they're tired of me, and so are you, so I'm going to sit down. But by the way, there's churches in all the foreign lands that we have servicemen. And they're all started by servicemen and women. And so I want y'all to think about how God uses the United States military